My fiancée told me to man up at my mom's funeral, so I left her there and canceled every wedding plan while she cried. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and for a long time I thought I'd found the one. Her name was Natalie the sharp, confident woman who walked into my office like she already owned the place. Everyone noticed her. She had that kind of energy that filled the room without even trying. We started as co-workers, then friends, and before I knew it, she was the center of my world. I used to think that if I ever got lucky enough to build a life with someone, it'd be someone like her, someone who made everything feel possible. She pushed me to aim higher at work, reminded me to take care of myself, and laughed at my dry sense of humor. I remember thinking, this is what stability feels like. Even my mom, who'd never approved of any of my exes, absolutely loved her. She'd smile and say, "She's the daughter I never had." The way she said it always warmed me, like, maybe finally I'd found someone who fit seamlessly into my family and my life. But there were small moments that didn't sit right. Times when Natalie's confidence felt more like control. Like when I got a promotion, and instead of celebrating, she asked, "So, are you finally going to start dressing like management?" Or when I told her about visiting my mom in the hospital for the first time, and she sighed, "You worry too much, she's strong." I brushed it off every time, telling myself she just had a different way of caring. I thought I was building a forever with her, a shared apartment, a wedding date, even baby names we'd joked about on lazy Sundays. I didn't realize I was building something much more fragile, something that would start to crack the moment life stopped being picture-perfect. Because when grief finally came knocking, I learned who she really was. My mom's health had been declining for months before it really sank in that this was the end. Stage 4 cancer, the kind of diagnosis that doesn't come with hope, only borrowed time. I spent every evening at the hospital watching her shrink into someone I barely recognized. She was still my mom, still cracking dry jokes between chemo sessions, but there was a heaviness in the air that never left. The smell of antiseptic, the soft beeping of monitors, the way the fluorescent lights made everything look pale and tired. It all became my second home. Natalie came with me for the first few weeks. She'd bring coffee, sit by my side, scroll on her phone, and occasionally squeeze my hand. But I could tell she hated it. The silence of hospital corridors, the sadness that lingered everywhere, it wasn't her world. One night, after my mom threw up from the meds, Natalie muttered, "I don't know how you handle this. It's exhausting." I didn't even know how to respond. I just nodded, because, honestly, I was too tired to argue. Over time, her visits grew shorter. Her texts turned into excuses. "I have a deadline. I don't want to see her like that. You know I care, right?" All versions of emotional distance. My dad told me once, "People show you who they are in times like these." I brushed it off, thinking he just didn't understand her. She was there for me, just in her own way, or so I kept telling myself. The night my mom stopped responding, I called Natalie in tears. She sounded irritated, whispering, "Babe, I'm in the middle of something. I'll come tomorrow, okay?" That tomorrow never came, because by the time she called back, my mom was gone, and all I could think was, she didn't even get to say goodbye. The day my mom passed still plays in my head like a slow-motion nightmare. The room was quiet except for the hum of machines and the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath, and even though I knew it was coming, the silence that followed felt unbearable. It was like the world had stopped, and every sound, every thought, every heartbeat just ... vanished. I called Natalie, my hands shaking, barely able to form words. "She's gone," I whispered. There was a pause on the other end, long enough for me to think she hadn't heard me. Then her voice came through flat, almost robotic. "I knew this would happen soon. You have to stay strong, okay?" I waited for something else, some warmth or comfort, but it never came. Just an awkward silence before she said she'd come by later. She didn't. That night, I sat alone in my mom's kitchen, surrounded by flowers from neighbors and relatives, staring at the chair she always sat in. Natalie texted me, "Try to get some rest, babe. You've got to be strong for everyone." I wanted to scream that I didn't need to be strong. I just needed someone to care. But instead, I stared at her message until the words blurred. When the funeral arrangements began, she barely helped. "It's too sad," she said, "and honestly, I wouldn't know what to do. She acted like grief was contagious, something to be avoided. Every time she spoke, it felt like she was a stranger who'd wandered into my life and didn't know where she was supposed to stand. Still, I told myself, love meant understanding, that she'd show up when it really mattered. I didn't know that the worst was yet to come, and it would happen in front of everyone I loved. The sky looked like it was grieving, too gray, heavy, and endless. I remember standing in front of my mirror, barely recognizing the man in the suit. My eyes were swollen, my hands trembling as I pinned my mother's favorite white rose to my lapel. When Natalie arrived, she looked flawless. As always, black dress, subtle makeup, hair perfectly done. For a split second, I felt grateful she was there, thinking maybe she'd surprise me with quiet comfort. I was wrong. At the church, everything blurred together, the priest's voice, the sobs of family, the hollow echo of the organ. My father was holding up better than I expected, which made me feel worse. When I finally walked up to the casket to give my final goodbye, something inside me broke. My mother's hands looked too still, too cold. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I just wept, the kind of raw, helpless sobs that come from somewhere deep in your chest. That's when I heard Natalie's whisper, sharp and cutting, "Man up. Everyone's watching." The words sliced through my grief like a knife. I froze. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her, but then she hissed again, "Come on, don't make a scene." My father turned his head, confusion flickering in his eyes, and I saw one of my cousins glance at us. I felt the heat of humiliation burn through my skin. I wanted to disappear. I stepped back, wiping my face, my chest tight. Every ounce of love I'd ever felt for her began to drain out of me, replaced by something colder, heavier disgust. I didn't say a word to her for the rest of the ceremony, but when it was finally over and everyone gathered outside the church, I decided I couldn't stay silent any longer. When the final prayer ended and the guests started to disperse, I stepped out into the drizzle. The church steps glistened with rainwater, and the air smelled like wet flowers and cigarette smoke. I could still feel the weight of her words echoing in my head. Man up. Everyone's watching. I wanted to pretend it hadn't happened, to focus on my mom, but that sentence had burned itself into my memory. I stood under a tree, trying to catch my breath, when Natalie came storming over in her heels. "Seriously," she snapped, voice low but full of irritation. "You embarrassed both of us in there." I blinked at her, too stunned to respond. "Embarrassed?" I said slowly. "I cried at my mother's funeral." "Yeah, and loudly," she said, glancing around to make sure no one heard. "You were shaken, making everyone uncomfortable. You're supposed to be the man of the family now. Act like it." Something inside me just snapped. The numbness that had carried me through the day vanished, replaced by pure, trembling rage. "Stay here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She frowned, confused. "What?" "Don't be dramatic," but I was already walking away. My shoes splashed through puddles as I headed for the parking lot. I didn't even look back. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove off, leaving her standing in the rain outside my mother's funeral. For the first few miles, I couldn't breathe. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When I finally pulled over near a quiet cemetery road, the grief hit all at once, not just for my mom, but for the illusion I'd been living in. I'd spent years believing I'd found love, and now I saw it for what it really was, control disguised as care. That was the moment I decided something needed to change, and it would start with her. I didn't go home that night. I drove aimlessly for hours, the rain streaking across my windshield like 1,000 tiny cracks in the world I thought I knew. My phone buzzed, nonstop Natalie, calling, texting, alternating between fake concern and anger. I ignored every notification until one message froze me in place. It read, "If your mom saw you like this, she'd be ashamed." I stared at those words until they stopped feeling real. My chest felt hollow, like all the air had been sucked out of the car. That wasn't grief anymore, that was cruelty. Cold, deliberate cruelty from someone who knew exactly where to stab. I turned my phone face down, trembling, but the rage wouldn't stop building. I wanted to scream to throw something, but instead, I just sat in the dark until my body went numb. When I finally got home, the apartment felt foreign. Our engagement photos, smiling down at me like a joke. The champagne glasses we'd saved from our proposal dinner still sat on the counter. I opened my laptop and went to the shared wedding folder we'd built together. Guest lists, dress fittings, flower arrangements, months of planning for a future that no longer existed. I started deleting everything, one click at a time. Each deleted file felt like breathing again. That's when I saw Ita's hidden email thread accidentally synced to our shared account. It was between Natalie and her bridesmaid, Erin. My heart sank as I read the subject line. He's crying again. Inside were dozens of messages mocking me. He's so emotional, one said. Are you sure you want to marry someone who breaks down over every little thing? And Natalie's reply, yeah, but he's good on paper. I can fix him. That was it. The moment I realized I hadn't been loved, I'd been managed, and this time, I wasn't going to stay silent about it. By morning, the grief had settled into something colder clarity. I hadn't slept, but I didn't feel tired. I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her texts again, watching her shift from guilt to manipulation in real time. Please talk to me. Then, you're acting insane. Then finally, I'm posting something nice about your mom to show support. That last one made my stomach turn. Within minutes, her post went live. A black and white photo of my mom with a caption that read, grieving alongside the love of my life. Rest easy, Angel. She even added a crying emoji. My phone started blowing up with messages from friends and coworkers. I'm so sorry, man. She's such a rock for you. A rock. That's what they called the woman who told me to man up over my mother's casket. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't need to defend myself. I realized the truth would reveal itself, given time. Still, I couldn't shake the disgust. She wasn't grieving, she was performing. She wanted sympathy, attention, validation. Every like on that post was a lie she fed on Dot. Later that day, my dad came by. He didn't ask about Natalie. He didn't have to. Your mom saw things before you did, he said quietly, setting a box of old letters on the table. Inside, I found one envelope with my name written in her handwriting. The note was short, just one line. Never marry someone who shames your heart. I don't know how long I sat there, just staring at that sentence. My mom had seen it. She'd known every fake smile, every subtle dig, every time Natalie belittled me in private. It had all been visible to someone who truly loved me. That night, I decided to stop protecting Natalie's image. She had built a mask in public, but I was done helping her wear it. 3 days later, just as I started to feel the quiet sink in, someone began pounding on my front door. I didn't need to look through the peephole. I knew that knock. When I opened it, Natalie stood there, drenched from the rain, mascara streaking down her face like black tears. Why are you doing this to me? She demanded, pushing past me into the house. I'm not doing anything to you, I said, voice low. You did this to yourself. Oh, come on, she snapped. You've been ignoring me for days. People are asking questions, and I look like some kind of villain. I stared at her, stunned by the irony. You are the villain, Natalie. You told me to man up at my mother's funeral. She rolled her eyes, scoffing. You're exaggerating. I was just trying to keep you from falling apart in front of everyone. God, you're so sensitive. That word sensitive was her favorite weapon. But I didn't bite this time. I walked over to my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up the email thread I'd found. Her face went pale the second she saw it. What is this? I asked, scrolling slowly so she could see every word she'd written. She tried to snatch the laptop, but I held it out of reach. You weren't supposed to see that, she said softly, voice trembling now. It was just venting. Venting, I repeated. You called me broken, pathetic, a project you could fix. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. You mocked the one person who ever believed in you, my mom, and you turned her funeral into your image rehab. Her tears came fast now, but I didn't feel sorry. I didn't mean it, she whispered. Yes, I said quietly. You did. I stepped back, opened the door, and pointed outside. Leave, and for the first time since I met her, she had nothing left to say. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. My phone was flooded with messages, friends, coworkers, even extended family. Natalie had gone nuclear. She posted a long apology letter on social media, painting herself as a heartbroken fiancé who had lost control due to grief. The post ended with, I hope he finds peace, even if it's without me. The comments section exploded. People were consoling her, saying how strong she was, how hard it must be to deal with a man who shuts down emotionally. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. I knew people would eventually see through it, and they did faster than I expected. A mutual friend sent me screenshots from a private group chat Natalie was in, where she bragged about winning the sympathy war. She even wrote, "He thinks deleting the wedding plans hurts me. Joke's on him, I already found a new venue in case he comes crawling back." That was the moment I stopped pitying her instead of confronting her publicly. I sent a single, formal message. Wedding canceled. Vendors and guests have been notified. You can keep your dress, it suits the performance. Then I posted nothing, just a quiet status update that read, "Learning peace requires losing people." People started asking questions, and Natalie's mask began to slip. The screenshots leaked first to close friends, then wider circles. Suddenly, her grieving fiancé image crumbled. Within a week, she deleted her accounts. The brand deals she'd been chasing pulled out. Her coworkers started avoiding her. The same audience that once admired her confidence now saw her for what she really was, calculating, shallow and cruel. As for me, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt empty but free. The noise faded, and in that silence, I finally began to breathe again. I thought that was the end of it. But grief has a strange way of finding you again, especially when it's tied to love that never was. For the first time in months, my apartment was quiet. No notifications, no forced laughter, no tension thick enough to choke on. Just me, a few half-empty boxes, and the silence of someone trying to piece himself back together. I took a leave from work and spent the next few weeks sorting through my mother's things photo albums. Letters, little trinkets she'd kept from my childhood. Every item was like a breadcrumb leading me back to who I used to be before everything fell apart. Grief is strange. Some days it hit me like a freight train. Other days it just sat in the corner, watching quietly. I started therapy. The first session, I couldn't talk without crying. The therapist said, "You've been holding two funerals, the one for your mom, and the one for the version of love you thought you had." That line stayed with me. I started running again, eating better, forcing myself to face mornings instead of dreading them. I found small ways to honor my mom, donating to the cancer ward that treated her, volunteering at the hospice on weekends. The people there reminded me of her strength, her kindness. Helping others didn't fix the ache, but it made the pain useful. One evening, I found one of her old voice messages saved on my phone. Her voice was soft, smiling. "You feel things deeply, and that's not a weakness. It's your gift." I must have replayed it a dozen times. For the first time, I didn't cry. I just smiled. Natalie had spent years convincing me that emotion was a flaw. But standing there in that quiet apartment, I realized my emotions were the only thing that ever made me human, and I wasn't ashamed of them anymore. A few months later, after the noise had faded and my life found some kind of rhythm again, I sat down at my mother's old desk, the same one she used to write birthday cards from, and opened a blank notebook. For weeks, I'd been dreaming of closure, of saying everything I'd swallowed down during those chaotic months. So that night, I wrote a letter, not to my mom, to Natalie. It started simply, "You taught me more about love than you'll ever understand." But the more I wrote, the more the words poured out, not with anger, but with clarity. I told her that love built on humiliation isn't love at all. That control dressed as care eventually suffocates the soul it claims to protect. I wrote about how my mother's death peeled back every mask in my life, revealing what was real and what was performance. I told her that I no longer hated her, because hate meant she still owned space in my heart. What I felt was nothing, and in that nothingness, there was peace. I even thanked her, in a strange way, for breaking me open enough to rebuild from something honest. When I finished, I folded the letter carefully and sealed it in an envelope without an address. I took it to my mom's garden, the one behind her house where lilies grew wild, and burned it under the evening sky. The smoke rose slowly, curling like the last remnants of something once important but no longer needed. As the ashes drifted away, I realized that closure doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from silence, from choosing not to hand your pain back to the person who caused it. That night, I finally slept through the entire night for the first time since she died. It's been nearly a year since that day at the church, and sometimes it still feels like it all happened to someone else. My life looks different now, quieter, smaller, but real. I moved out of the apartment Natalie and I shared and back into my mom's old house, the one with the creaky floors and the lilac bush she planted the year I was born. At first, it felt haunted, like every corner whispered what I'd lost. But over time, it started to feel like home again. This morning, I drove to the cemetery. The sky was soft and pale, and the air smelled like rain on grass. I brought a single white rose, the same kind I wore on my lapel that day. I stood there for a while, not saying much, just listening to the wind move through the trees. And then, for the first time, I smiled at her headstone instead of crying. "You were right, Mom," I whispered. "Love isn't supposed to hurt like that." Before I left, I slipped a folded note under a small stone, a copy of the line from her last letter. "Never marry someone who shames your heart." I didn't need to say anything else. That one sentence had carried me further than any prayer or apology ever could. As I walked back to the car, the sunlight broke through the clouds, that golden, forgiving kind of light that makes the world look new again. I took a deep breath, feeling it fill my chest, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel broken, just human. People think walking away means weakness, that leaving is surrender. But sometimes, walking away is the only way to live again. And that day, as I drove off from my mother's grave, I finally understood I hadn't lost everything. I just found myself